Welcome back. On to our first conversation. Africa's largest refinery, Dangote Refinery, is set to begin crude oil import from the United States in February. According to reports from Bloomberg, Trafigura Group has brokered a deal to supply Dangote Refinery with 2 million barrels of the West Texas Intermediate Midland crude expected to be delivered by the end of next month, marking the first time the refinery will purchase non-Nigerian crude. This move, which signals a response to the changing oil industry where the U.S. is gradually becoming a major player in the global supply chain, has raised a lot of questions. I have joining me for this conversation, Oyeyemi is an oil and gas lawyer at AO2 Law. Oyeyemi, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Esther. Good morning.
What do you make of this latest development with Dangote Refinery seeking to, well, we know the plans are already underway to buy crude, the West Texas Intermediate from the U.S. Could you tell us, just to get your initial thoughts on this and perhaps what this means?
Okay, I think the news was met with a lot of sensationalism and also emotions, especially on the Nigerian, from the Nigerian populace, right? But I think how we should look at this would be from what I would call a commercial perspective. Now, the refinery was built not only to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware that the refinery was built only to refine Nigerian oil. That's one. Two is that the question would be what has led to the owners of Dangote Refinery looking to other sources of crude oil apart from Nigeria, right? The answers would be the question of, the issue of crude oil availability, right, which is the feedstock for the refinery. As we well know, there's a shortage of crude oil availability for supply to the local market. And perhaps the reason for this is that over the years, what we have been doing as a country is to export crude oil with little attention paid to the local market, perhaps because of the moribund government-owned refinery. Now, the Dangote Refinery coming on stream definitely will change the game in terms of how oil producers need to cater for both the local market and the international market. So shortage of crude in itself perhaps is not necessarily a bad thing, considering the timing when the refinery has just started. It just started in Q4 of last year, right? Typically, what you have in the sale of commodities such as crude oil is that most times the crude produced, right, are already sold even before they have been produced under forward sale contracts. So you find out that the issue of crude oil availability as of now may be a short-term issue, right? And this will now be subject to certain other things which I will mention now. It will be a short-term issue if government is able to enforce domestic crude oil supply obligations under the Petroleum Industry Act, whereby the upstream producers are supposed to supply a certain amount or a certain quantity to the local market, provided also the local market or the refiners locally would pay for it at a competitive price, and also ensure that the payments are not delayed. Now, if the issue of domestic crude oil supply obligations are sorted by the regulator, perhaps the likes of Dangote Refinery will get or may get more locally sourced crude oil. But in all of this, let's not forget that Dangote Refinery is privately owned, right? And for whatever is worth, right, the refinery must continue to operate. And what has been done by the Dangote refineries, what are refined products, and however the the company deems fit in order to get its feedstock, it should do, right? Because obviously there are obligations which the company has also to its lenders. So money has to be made.
Right. If I could just come in here, we'll talk about supply issues and plants in just a minute. I just wanted you to speak to the type of crude that Dangote's refinery will be purchasing from the U.S., the West Texas Intermediate Midland crude. Now, we know that we produce the Bonny light sweet crude here. Are there similarities? Why the choice of that particular crude? If you could just shed some light on that for us, that'd be great.
Well, so, we have the various crude grades which we have produced or which we produce in Nigeria. I think as of today, there are about 10, 11 types of crude grade. As you may be aware, the refinery has actually received two different types of grade, Bonny Light and the one that has produced, that is produced from Agbami, right? In terms of the crude grade, WTI, whether it's sweeter or better than Bonny Light, right? Perhaps that would be a question for the engineers to answer. But one thing is clear, that irrespective of the crude grade, at least for now, we've seen that the refinery can actually produce different types of crude grades. And I guess that's an advantage for the refinery. So I don't think crude grade should be a concern. What would happen is that the crude grade perhaps will determine what will be the output in terms of refined products.
Right. So on the issue of supply now, obviously, there are still challenges. We're still, according to the NNPCL, producing somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5. But, from time to time in the news, we keep, seeing these headlines pointing to sabotage, sabotage points being discovered in the forest or wherever, those swampy, remote areas. So it's still ongoing. Oil theft, oil vandalism is still alive and well. But would you say that perhaps it's maybe been brought under control? I'm very careful with the language I'm using here now because it's really difficult to tell at any point in time the extent and the scale of the theft and the vandalism that's still ongoing. But what are you hearing, and what do you know in terms of how better we're doing now in terms of how we're keeping more of that crude away from oil theft?
I think in the last 6 months, if you notice the crude, the discovery of what I would call illegal refineries, illegal pipelines, and illegal infrastructure, right, that are being used for crude theft. I think the discovery in the last 6 months has been remarkable, and this has been because of some of the efforts which the NNPCL, right, has taken, perhaps with also private security outfits. What is clear is that there is a huge illegal industry with regards to crude theft, which needs to be tackled, right? But what I would say is that significant progress has actually been made, at least based on what we've seen in the news, whereby the likes of NNPCL continues to discover illegal pipeline infrastructure that are used to siphon crude. Now, if you also look at the historical figures, also perhaps in the last 6 to 9 months, you would see that we've seen a steady increase in terms of crude oil supply into the international market. And even as at, I think, Q3, Q4 last year, Nigeria was actually speaking to OPEC to increase its production quota. So in as much as production has improved, one thing we should also note is that the issue of theft definitely would affect our production levels, right? But I think what needs to be done is that security issues and theft issues needs to be tackled continuously.
Right. Thank you so much, Oyeyemi, for talking to us today, helping us shed more light and give perspective on this topic. That was Oyeyemi Oke, an oil and gas lawyer at AO2 Law.